Hello and welcome on in everybody. I'm Sam Peterson. I'm your host for today's Photoshop challenge. Today we're going to be creating a sci-fi display, a sort of holographic heads-up display. I can show you what that's going to look like. So this is the image that we're using on the starter file, and this is kind of what we're creating. So this sort of a little holographic screen that you see in a lot of sci-fi movies. So if you want to get the starter file that has the resources for this challenge, make sure to check out the description below. It has the link that you need to download this file. So let's jump into it and get going. This is going to be two parts. We're going to be making the holographic screen using various shapes in Photoshop, and then we're going to be compositing it into the scene. So hopefully we got enough time for this, but just in case, I do have a pre-made one that I'll be using, but I'll show you some of the techniques that I used. So first I'm going to create a new layer with Control-Shift-N. And this is really just a backing layer. This is temporary. I'll just put BG for background. I'm going to fill it in with this dark blue. We're going to create our design on top of this. Something dark in the background will allow us to see our design more clearly. So if you've used Illustrator, you might find Illustrator a little bit more comfortable for this type of thing. But I want to show you, if you're just familiar with Photoshop, how you can create various shapes and kind of be clever with masking and that kind of thing to create a lot of cool effects with the shape tools. So first I'm going to go to my shape tools, drop down, I'm going to click and hold and select the rectangle tool. And then from here, I can click and drag out a rectangle. I'm going to Control Z that, and I'm going to make it fill up the whole screen here. This is going to be our outer border. I'm not going to have any fill, so the fill is checked off, and the stroke is set to this bright blue. I'm basically using this bright blue. It's not all the way, but it's 56EBED for the hex code, but just something bright. You can choose any color, of course, as well. I'm going to use a thicker pixel for the stroke, since this is going to be the border. So we'll do 50, and then we can create another one. Maybe I'll make one in here that's kind of tall. We'll put some text in it or something like that. I'm going to lower the pixels at the top here to maybe 25, half that. I think that looks pretty good. You can always scale these and adjust them after the fact. You can click these little anchors here, these little handles, and you can round it out if you want. So you got a lot of flexibility with the shapes that you create here. If I click and hold this, we can switch to the ellipse tool. You can also shift and press the hotkey for that. So if I want to switch between these different shapes, I'm just holding on shift and pressing U. And then I got the ellipse tool there. So kind of a hotkey if you want to get to it quicker. Now, if you hold shift, you can strain it to a circle. If you let go of shift, you can kind of get ovals or any shape that you want. If you press Alt, you'll scale it from the center. And if you hold on shift while pressing Alt, you constrain the proportions while doing that. You can also press and hold on spacebar to reposition it. So shift, alter option, and spacebar all give you some flexibility. So if I want to scale it from the center, I'll hold on Alt, hold on shift to keep it a circle, and I'll move it exactly where I want with spacebar. And that looks good. I might want to do something more, like 125 pixels, thicken that up quite a bit. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's see, what I want to do here is duplicate this, and we'll create another version. So I'm going to Control or Command J to duplicate it, press V for the move tool, and I'm going to scale it down. But again, I want it to be proportional with the other one. So I'm going to Control Z that. I'm going to hold on Alt. And then that way we can scale it from the center and keep these all lined up. So I think that looks pretty cool. Kind of one thing that you can do that's a little trick is if I select my rectangular marquee tool here, I can create a little like hole punch shape essentially. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to do Control or Command Shift N. I'm going to press, I'm just going to type punch for this. I'm going to fill it in with a color that I can see that's different. Press G for the fill bucket, and I'm going to fill that in. Now what I can do is I can actually create some guides, because I'll need those in a second. So if I have my rulers up, which is Control or Command R to pop those up, do you see on the edges? You can actually click and drag guides in place. So I want to essentially line it up with the center of my circle. So I'm going to click and drag those, and then I'm going to click from the top and drag another one. And now you can see it's snapping into place for me because it's snapping to that circle. If you go to View, and then you make sure Snap is checked on, and then you go to Snap to Guides, you can have these things kind of snap up with each other, which will help achieve what we're trying to do. So from here, what I can do is I can take this punch shape that we created. This is just a temporary shape, and you'll see if I drag it around, it kind of snaps to the center, and that's what I want. So what I can do here, I could mask this, but I'm just going to go ahead and delete it using the punch. Basically, this second circle, we're going to punch shapes out of it. So I'm going to click my punch shape, control click the icon, the thumbnail icon, and if I go to my second ellipse tool and I press delete, it won't let me because it's currently not rasterized. So what we need to do is right click that, do rasterize layer, and you can mask this if you want, but because of a next step we're doing, I'm just going to delete it. You can always make backups, but I'm just going to press delete. Now if I hide my punch, you'll see we punched a hole there. So I'll go into my little punch shape, and I'm holding on shift to rotate it in different increments. And now I'm going to control click again the thumbnail icon, go back to my ellipse, press delete. And you can kind of get cool shapes doing that. Another thing you could do, actually let's do that a couple more times to get the look that we want. Control click, delete, go back to this. I still have it selected, so I'm just going to go to my ellipse, press delete. There, now we got our punch done. So I'm going to delete the punch. I don't need it. I just kind of want to show you kind of some cool shapes you can make doing that. I actually use that technique a decent amount, negative and positive space, to mask or delete depending on what I want. From here, let me put my guide up. All right, from here, what I could do is I could actually just duplicate Controller Command J, that again, scale it down, but hold Alt or Option, scale it from the center. I could rotate that holding Shift. I could lower the opacity of the second circle we created to like around 50%. So it gives it a little bit of variety in visual hierarchy, which I think looks pretty good. And lastly, I want to show you, you can Control Command J that again, scale it out from the center using Alt or Option. Let's try that again. And then I could do the same thing we did before with the punch. So I could use this as a duplicate and then press Control and click. That selects it. Go to my initial circle. I'm going to rasterize that. Right click, rasterize, and delete. So hopefully this isn't too many steps. It isn't too complex. But I just think there's some clever ways, you know, even in Photoshop, you can play around with shapes and get some cool graphic designs. A couple other things we might want are some of those like techie hard lines that you see. So if you go to the pen tool is another kind of cool technique you can use. And of course, this design, you don't have to follow along. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just trying to show you some different tools you can get to kind of get some cool different looks and variety in all these shapes. So I'm going to hold on. All right, well, first off, if you have the pen tool, you can click and drag like we did before to create these curved lines, right? We talked about that before. But if you shift click and don't drag, you can get these hard lines, which works really well for this sci-fi look. You can get diagonals, horizontals, and verticals. So what I want to do is kind of create a little design here. Click, diagonal. Let's try that a little higher, something like this. And you can kind of create whatever designs you want. You could even create a little ball cap on the end. If you go in here with the circle tool we just had, and this time give it a fill, but not necessarily a stroke. And I think that looks pretty good on the end of that. We can also do things like text. If you want to put some text in here. Got some lorem ipsum going on. I'm going to make that the same color as what we had. Just going to color pick from here. So if you click and drag, you can determine the size of the box you want. Another thing I did was I actually used the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to create a new layer. and I can create sort of like a bar graph type of effect. So I drag that out, I press G for my fill bucket, and I filled that in, but I got the wrong color, so I'm going to color pick our blue. And what I could do is I could deselect that and just press Control or Command J to create a duplicate. Hold on, press V for the move tool, hold on Shift and drag it to the side. I could select both of those layers we just grabbed, press Control or Command J, press V for the move tool, hold on Shift and drag it out horizontally. That's just kind of a quick way to duplicate multiple things. I'm going to Shift click all of these, scale them down, and basically what I wanted to do was just create a quick little bar graph effect by holding on Shift while I drag down to make these various lengths. And the last thing I wanted to cover was just, I like to give it a little bit of a look like it's being filled up. So if you hold, or if you select one of these bar graphs, select one of the taller ones, and you click this at the top of the layers panel, lock transparencies, I can color pick this half value and kind of do that. But what I want to do is I want to use my brush tool with a hard brush. So I pressed B for my brush tool, and now I can paint in. But what I want to do is hold on Shift, and I can get this hard line. So you can kind of get this effect. Just lock the transparencies, select your brush tool, and do that. And you can kind of get this, like the meters are partially full. So I think that's about everything. I used the circle tool, the ellipse tools, the rectangle tools. We made some manual selections with the marquee tool, the pen tool, and the text tool. I just kind of wanted to give you a glimpse at the things you can create. You can go nuts with this, use any techniques you want, have fun with it, but hopefully that kind of gives you some tools to work with, and hopefully that wasn't too much too quickly. But what I want to go in and do now is actually select, or actually composite this into the rest of the scene. So I did this in the same document. You can do it in a separate document if it's more comfortable, but I already have a graphic that I created, so I'm going to go ahead and delete all these. Shift click, delete them, because I already have mine here. So this is my final one after I played around with it for a bit, and I wanted to show you how we can composite that into the rest of the scene. You can see I also added some grid lines with the line tool back here. I just used the line tool, duplicated it a bunch, and rotated it. And then I lowered the opacity quite a bit. And I merged this all together, and I created a smart object with it. So if you right click, you can do create smart object, and that's going to allow us to scale it around. So real quick before we keep going into compositing, I want to say hey to everyone. Jennifer, what's going on? Seraphin, good to see you. Frank, Norsh, Anki, Sean, Froja, good to see you. What's up, everybody? I think I saw Cody in there. Hey, everyone. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. And keep in mind, this Friday, we're going to be doing a review stream, a Q&A. I can do a demo if you guys want me to clarify anything more. So if you have any questions, keep those in mind. Shoot me a message on Discord. We can talk about all that stuff and review it on Friday. Umacorn, Kiss My Creative, good to see you both. All right, so let's jump into it, the compositing. So what I want to do here is I want to duplicate this hologram, this little graphic we created. I just want to make a backup. So I'm going to do Control or Command J, and I'm going to drag this below my background. I'm going to double click my background, press Enter to unlock it, and we'll put the copy below it. All right, so what I can do from here is I can transform this. I'm going to select V for my move tool up at the top left. And I'm going to hold on Control just to warp this. So basically what I want to do is I want to flip it. So I'm going to take this far left point. I'm holding on Control. I'm clicking and dragging. I'm going to pull it over the other point. It's now twisted. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom left point. And now we kind of get some the right orientation, because we'd be seeing the back of the screen from this point of view. Oh, whoops. I clicked out of it. Now I got to do it again. So we'll do that real quick. Control and click, move this around. Make sure to press Enter to confirm these transforms. But I'm going to be moving this around for a bit. So let's try this. We're going to give it a bit of a perspective look. So I think something like this. You know, it's going away from us as it fades away. So if you can kind of control the level of perspective that you want. But I don't want it too extreme. I don't want it cutting off the top here. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to press enter to confirm that. I could always edit this further, but I think what we had looks pretty good. Maybe I'll stretch it out a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to press enter, and that's good. You could flip horizontal first, absolutely. I just like transforming it with the controls. It's pretty quick and easy once you get used to it. So what I want to do is I might want to blur this a little bit. It looks very sharp, but since we have a smart object, we can actually go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I might want to do it like 3 pixels, 2 pixels, something pretty subtle. But I like it because we can always go back, double click on that smart filter and change it. But we'll leave that as it is. What I don't like about this right now is it doesn't read well in the background. There's a very bright background, and it's kind of blowing out our glowing holographic display. So what I want to do is actually create a background multiply layer. So on top of our background image, I'm going to do Control Command Shift N. Just going to call it multiply and select the blending mode of multiply. From here, I'm going to go into my gradients. If you see the fill bucket over on the top or the left, I can click and hold that to get the drop down to select my gradient tool. Now here are my gradients. I basically have a dark blue color and a white. So the white, when set to multiply, won't have any effect. The dark blue will give us this kind of coolish blue shadow. I'll show you what that looks like now. I'm gonna shift and click so it's straight, it's horizontal, and I'm gonna drag out to around his face. We'll see how that looks. You can see if I toggle that on and off, it doesn't affect his face. So I could try dragging out further. Basically, so it just affects the background but not his face. I think right up to his face looks pretty good. So since this is set to multiply, we get that effect. If it was on normal, it would look like that. But we're getting a little bit of a gradient just behind the hologram like we want. So I think that works pretty well. Also, if these guides are in your way, you can always drag them out. Whoops. That was my gradient tool, or you can press Control or Command H, which I do a lot. But that will also hide your transform effects. So the next step, I think, would be to add a outer glow to this hologram. So I'm going to double click our hologram layer, our graphic layer, and I'm going to do outer glow. For this, I have screen. The blending mode screen works really well. Opacity is 40. That just controls how intense this is. I think 40 works pretty well. I have a very bright blue selected. Spread is at 0, size is at 15, but you can max out the size. It gives it a more diffused glow. I have a little bit of a tighter glow right around the edges. I think that looks pretty good at 15. Contour is set to linear. Range is at 50, but you can see toggling it on and off gives us a little bit of glow, which I think helps boost the effect a little bit more. So from there, what I want to do is maybe create a screen glow. You can see this image works particularly well because his face is right, like the lighting is coming directly from the front, right where our graphic is. So I'm gonna get rid of these guides real quick since I don't need them anymore. So from here, I'm gonna create a new layer and we'll call it Screen Glow. And I'm gonna use the polygonal lasso tool here on the left-hand side. You can click and hold if you don't see it. You see the lasso tool, select that. And I'm just gonna create this kind of effect that the light would have from the screen. I'm gonna have it go all the way off screen here. I just gotta make this line up with the edge. Let's see if I can find that real quick. All right, that's good enough. And then connect it here. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill that in with a bright blue. I gotta select my fill bucket, my paint bucket tool over here on the left. We had our gradient tool before. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change this blending mode to screen. And then from here, I can essentially just mask it out. I'm going to select my mask button at the bottom of the layers panel. And I'm just going to go in with a soft round brush, very large, painting black. Black to conceal, white to reveal. I may want to crank my flow down really low, something like 10%. And essentially just control that glow. I don't want it going nearly that far, but we can always mask it out and bring it back in case I do want it. It just allows us that flexibility with making that shape go that far. Let's mask it out a bit around here. I could even kind of just run it along the edges. You can shift and click if you want. But just doing that back and forth, maybe I'll crank the flow up. Can kind of give you this feathered edge. So we're just sort of painting this to control it exactly how we want. Shift clicking back and forth again, that straight line. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good. Might do some final adjustments here. And then I can always lower that opacity to make it as subtle or as overt as I want. So I think that looks pretty good. What I want to do here, lastly, is select the figure and edit him so he looks like he's being affected by the glow a little bit. So what I want to do is duplicate my background layer with Control or Command J, and then I want to mask him out. So I'm going to select my quick selection tool and actually just do select subject here at the top. See how that does. That's the AI, Photoshop's AI selecting what it thinks is the subject, and it actually did a pretty flawless job. So I'm going to go ahead and use that selection. I think that's perfect. I'm going to select the mask button here at the bottom of the layers panel, this little rectangle. And now, if I get rid of the background, you can see that we have him isolated. So I'm going to type in figure. It's good to name your layers. I don't think I've named all my layers. Background. And what I want to do here is actually go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation. Click OK, and then right-click that layer and clip it to the figure. From here, what we can do is we can click Colorize, and we can make the color match the color of the screen on him. So I think something like a bluish tone, but I need to crank up the saturation. That's not really working. So let's try a boosted saturation of like 60. And I think the hue being around 190 looks pretty good. That works pretty well. Saturation's around 60, and that kind of matches the color of our screen. Now what I want to do is I want to go into my mask, my layer mask for this layer, and I want to paint out the shadow. I'm using black, again, black to conceal, white to reveal. So I'm going in the shadow and I'm painting out that blue tone because I only want the blue tone in those light areas. I can go to white and get that little part on his cheek, that little part that light is hitting. I think that looks pretty good. So if I toggle that on and off, you can see it kind of matches the color a bit more. Now I could do that a little further too. I could go into Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels, click OK, right click that layer, do Create Clipping Mask, do the same thing, and crank the brightness up just a bit. I think that looks pretty good. And then go ahead and go into the mask and do the same thing. Paint out the brightness towards the back because I want that contrast really up in the front. So I think that looks pretty good. So together, these two effects look like this. It boosts the brightness and it changes the color. So that's a hue and saturation level and, hue and saturation adjustment layer and a levels adjustment layer. From there, I think we're pretty much good to go. I think that's kind of the effect I want. Lastly, what I might do is click on my background layer, Control or Command Shift N for a new layer, create a multiply layer, set the blending mode to multiply, and I can use my fill bucket, my paint bucket tool over here, hotkey G, to fill in like a bluish, purplish tone. I want the greenish blue light of the foreground to contrast a cooler light of the background. This just gives you a little bit more focus on the subject matter, as you can see. You can fill it in with whatever color you want. If you go really extreme, it'll look like that. But I'm going to keep it subtle. And I can always lower the opacity from here and fine tune it exactly where I want. If I went too heavy handed, I can lower the opacity. But I think that looks pretty good. That gives us some nice contrast. And yeah, that's it for our challenge. I hope this wasn't too much information. I know this was a lot. Basically, I just wanted you to kind of see what you can do with the pen tool, the shape tools in Photoshop, and then how you can use that to sort of composite into a scene and make it look like everything belongs. But that is it for me. Guys, thanks so much for joining. Definitely check out the Discord community if you've not done that yet. I've been really impressed by all these entries. I've especially been enjoying seeing the last challenge of the galactic, like, surreal portrait effect. These are really cool, so check them out. We got the mentors in here, myself, Ted, Valder, giving feedback, as well as community members giving feedback. So definitely check it out if you have not yet. This is kind of where we hang out when we're not actually streaming, when we're not live. And remember that Friday we're doing a review stream. So if you have any questions or anything you want me to cover, shoot me a message on Discord, or just keep them in mind for the Friday stream. But thanks so much for coming out, everybody. I do appreciate it. I'll see you guys all next time. Have a good one, everybody.